maybe it actually was a horrible investment and that campaign just isn't successful and we should never do it again. But without actually critically evaluating that data and sharing all of the results, you'll never get to the bottom of it and you'll never have real results.
Are you a fitness-loving foodie? Then Defy Snacks is for you. Defy offers real, high-quality chocolate you love, combined with functional ingredients, giving you as much as 26 grams of protein per bag, so you can be both a little bit bad and a little bit good at the same time. As a female-owned brand, Defy dedicates a portion of its profits to other women-owned businesses. Currently sold in the US, you can find us on snacks.com and follow us on social at Defy Snacks.
Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative, the creative effectiveness ad tech platform, and this is a almost weekly podcast about the future of data-driven marketing. Every week or so, I get the privilege and the pleasure of interviewing one of our industry's leaders, and this week is no different. I'm on a call with Zahra Hemraj, who is Director, Marketing and Data Integration at Citizen Watch Canada. So Zahra, for anyone who doesn't know who you are and what you do, could you give us a bit of background?
Yes, of course. Hi, Tom, and hi to everyone listening. I am currently at Citizen Watch Canada, as Tom mentioned, as the Director of Marketing and Data Integration. I actually started my career in IT, totally different. I worked in IT and telecom. From there, I did an MBA in luxury brand management. And then I shifted over to the art industry where I focused on CRM at Christie's. And then from there, I left that and am now at Citizen Watch Canada.
So in that very career, what have been the bad recommendations that you've been given, you've told, or you've heard?
Sure. My career, as I mentioned, has been quite diverse, starting from somewhere very different and then ending up in what I do now, which encompasses from end to end, any side of marketing, including PR and communications, including data, including kind of the look and feel of the website, building catalogs. So it's very different than where I started, which was project management and testing. And what I often hear in my career or in marketing is that you either can't get ahead without a network or that you have to have a very linear career. And to me, I think this is absolutely wrong because I think that while having a network helps, it's not a requirement for success. You can only build a network through starting your career to begin with. And secondly, about having a linear career path, I mean, if anything, I'm an example that you don't have to have a linear career path and you can get to where you ultimately want to get to or where you're inspired or passionate for through different steps. And a good hiring manager or a good a good agency or a good company will actually value and understand your different career paths or your steps to get to where you were to be able to contribute to your role, because through all of that, you're able to actually have a different mindset. For me, it's been, I was born in Canada. I started my career in Toronto. I then worked in London, in Paris, in New York. I've done projects in the UAE, and I'm back in Canada now. So while also my industries have varied, the cultures that I've worked with and the focus has been very different. And that's all helped me be able to contribute to the work I do and have a different perspective than other people that I work with. And I think it's really important that people are aware that you really don't have to have a linear career path to be successful.
I'm going to drag you back a little bit to saying that you don't need a network, because for me, I'm just one of those people that really believes in that, and I'd love to hear more about the counter opinion there, because when everyone asks me that question, I'm like, get a network, get to know everyone, because you never know what will happen and when those like nodes will connect.
Absolutely. So I will say that yes, networking is important, but having a network to start your career or to be successful in your career is not something that I think is a crucial step. Because again, taking my own career or my own experiences, most of the jobs I've gotten have not been through people that I know. It's been through literally applying on LinkedIn. As an example, being at Christie's, everyone that would reach out to me once I was there was like, how did you get in, or who did you speak with, or what was your, like, what was your connection to be able to get into that role? And I didn't have a background in art history. I didn't have anyone that I knew that was there. And I really just applied on LinkedIn, and I was able to get through the door. And I think if it's the right moment, if it's the right step for you, and if you're in the right position, you end up being able to step into that, like in that you're present in the right moments. The network is important in that it helps you learn more about what's going on out there, about keeping current with your industry. So speaking to other peers and having that connection. But I don't think that it's crucial to getting a role or to achieving success in your career, because I don't think that the network can really take you that far. They might provide you some insights, but at the end of the day, it comes down to you and your experiences and who you are as a person, presenting yourself to the company that you're looking to get into or to the business that you're looking to start.
Indeed. So be good, be really good, be brilliant, and you don't really need a network. Okay, maybe that's why I'm so focused on having a network. But anyway, there you go. Moving very quickly along. So what is your best bit of advice that you have for data-driven marketers? What is that silver bullet bit of knowledge that you find sharing with your team?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's been said before, but I think that the key to a better data-driven marketer is really looking beyond the data. So while the data tells one story, it doesn't provide the context, and it doesn't always show you where you started from. And data can also be biased depending on what type of data you're pulling, which brings me to kind of the expansion of that in terms of being a better data-driven marketer, and is to not be afraid of negative results. So too often I'll see people in my industry using data to prove something was successful or to show progress, and they hide the data that doesn't support how things are actually doing. But I think that, I mean, from my IT background, for instance, I learned the importance of actually looking for negative results, because when I used to head QA for an enterprise project, one of the things that we always kind of ingrained in our testers was that if you're not finding an error, then you aren't doing your job. Nothing is perfect. No system, no code, or no data is ever perfect, and no campaign's ever going to be perfect. So if you're not willing to show the mistakes or the errors, then you're never going to improve the system, and you're never going to improve on your campaigns. You're never going to grow your brand's presence or impact. If you're saying that everything you're doing is perfect, then where's the room for improvement? So I think that that's really key to becoming a better data-driven marketer, because something having a negative result doesn't always mean that it's not worth doing again, but it does mean that you can look at ways to improve it. Or perhaps your data capture mechanisms aren't accurate and they're not capturing the data that you need. Or maybe you didn't achieve X and you're actually trying to achieve Y. Or maybe it actually was a horrible investment and that campaign just isn't successful and we should never do it again. But without actually critically evaluating that data and sharing all of the results, you'll never get to the bottom of it, and you'll never have real results.
Gosh, I absolutely love that. I think that's such, and you're right. But as a supplier, that just kind of fills me full of dread, because you want to tell the best story. You want to go, look, you employed us to do this, and and here's all these amazing things, but don't worry about these not so amazing things over here. But actually, I hadn't thought about that as being a real positive. So yeah, these things didn't work. Right, what are we going to do about it next time? This is our opportunity to learn. So that is brilliant advice. Thank you. So we're now going to come on to your shiny new object, which is the psychology behind the data. So what is that, and why is it your shiny new object?
So I think that we often forget that behind the data, behind what we're looking at and what we're analyzing, there are people that are helping us get that data. So and what I mean by that is not the people gathering the data, but the people that are doing the actions that result in the data that we're receiving. So there are people that are clicking on stuff. There are people that are opening emails or that are visiting certain websites or so forth. And or that are transacting. And those people, there's a psychology behind that. There's a reason that that happens. There's a reason that certain metrics exist. And we need to look beyond what we're seeing in terms of just numbers or just the ones and zeros that we're looking at. And what does it actually mean? What is the actual reason that something is happening? So why do people act in a certain way? Why did we get these results? And digging into that reason and the psychology behind it. So what's the context behind why did someone, why did we get X number of impressions on a particular ad that ran digitally? Like what made us get those impressions, or what made us get those click-throughs? Is it because that ad was just that successful? And if so, then what about that ad? Was it the color scheme? Was it the message that was there? Was it the time that we ran that campaign? What is it about that enticed someone to be able to do that? What made a person behave in a particular way? And I think that often gets lost when we're just looking at data, because kind of back to what I was saying earlier, we end up wanting to show results and we don't think about the psychology behind it.
This episode of the Shiny New Object podcast is brought to you in partnership with MadFest. Whether it's live in London or streamed online to the global marketing community, you can always expect a distinctive and daring blend of fast-paced content, startup innovation pitches, and unconventional entertainment from MadFest events. You'll find me causing trouble on stage, recording live versions of this podcast, and sharing a beer with the nicest and most influential people in marketing. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. So there's this idea, I can't remember where it was in the book I'm writing, that they came up with this idea that what we all get drawn towards is the easiest data to collect. Like what the most abundant, easy thing we can just get by like clicking on a link or looking at a dashboard. Where in reality, there's some data that we might not even be able to get at all. But there's assumption just because we can't get it that it's not important. And there's a kind of range between those things. So I because we discussed this before, I think you're right that you have to understand that why. Like, well, why did that ad work? But what are your techniques and methods for getting to that why? Because that ad worked. Oh, is it because we should have served it after midday, or because it actually had like a 25% off or whatever? Wait, cause if you're talking about psychology, then you're talking about people. You're talking about qual there, really. So how do you bring a qual approach to data-driven quant?
Exactly. So I think that is the essence of it. So for me, with the work that I do, or with what I try to understand, I mean, there's a variety of different things that go into it. So it could be looking at the trends in the market right now and understanding why certain things are popular, or what's, if you're talking about like certain, I don't know, like a TikTok trend that's going on and you created an ad that kind of was similar to that, maybe that'll attract more attention, and maybe that's why that ad did well. But it could also be about things like understanding, like it comes down to a lot of things. It could be color, like, the psychology behind color and the colors that you use in your ads, and did that cause a certain reaction, and thinking through that. It could also be things, what we try to assess and what I try to look at is so if I'm trying to understand if it had to do, for instance, with the time or the day, or, what was going on, what are the cultural moments of significance that are happening right now, or certain national days, or certain things that are happening in current affairs that might make a certain caption or a certain type of product more attractive to a consumer? Does that have anything to do with what we're showing, or, the type of ad that's existing? Is that creating that kind of reaction? Or does it come down to maybe, if we're looking at different times, if we're thinking about, okay, let's do some A/B testing, which is always very important to see if that makes an impact. And if so, then we can try to make certain assumptions that maybe this is based on that. At the end of the day, that type of understanding ends up being more assumption driven than actual, like there's not anything particularly tangible that I can show you to say this is the actual end result of why this happened, but it's based on assumptions and it's based on understanding the market. It's based on understanding what exists out there. And it's also based on conversations with people. So I do a lot of face-to-face conversations with media or with end consumers at various different types of events that we hold, because I try to hear a little bit more and listen to what they're saying, like why did this exist, or why does this appeal to you? And they'll often tell me what they're thinking, and that gives me some insight into why certain people might react to a particular product in a particular way. And the other way that's always a really good way of hearing what consumers think is looking at the types of calls that come into if you have a call center or a customer relations team, kind of understanding what is the feedback that we're getting, or what are people calling about. And maybe that's kind of relevant to what we're seeing in terms of our results. But if we just stay tunnel visioned into this is what's happening in marketing and in data, and we don't think about our other departments or what's going on out there, then we won't really get to hear that. Other ways, again, other departments to hear from our sales teams when they're going out to some of our retailers to understand a little bit more about what they're hearing out in the market. And I haven't done official focus groups here, but like indirectly you're speaking to people and you're kind of getting some feedback that then ties back to what you're actually seeing as your results, right?
So can you give me an example of a specific moment when that happened, when you did that, when you had your ones and zeros, you had your alphanumerical data, and then you heard something from a call center or someone in the field? I understand it theoretically, but it would just be lovely to see an example in practice.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you an example of something. Okay, so if we looked at, there was a particular product that we released, and the actual sales figures for that product, as we saw them, were not positive. Like they weren't, it wasn't performing at the level that we wanted to see. And the feedback that we were hearing from, the retailers, from the sales team, what they were hearing was that, we're just not seeing people coming in for that. Either it had to do with, it's not something that they felt was current, or they weren't interested in it for a variety of reasons. But on the other hand, when we looked at our data, the data showed that for our marketing campaigns that we were running, that product was performing above and beyond anything else that we had launched in like the months surrounding that product. And it was the best click-throughs, the best, like interest in a variety of ways. Like there was the clicks, there was the likes, there was the conversion wasn't quite there, because again, we weren't seeing the sales result from a transactional perspective, but we were seeing the conversion in terms of that linking through to our website, and seeing that type of conversion that we were getting out of it. So it was performing really well from a data perspective in what we were seeing, but our sales results were not aligned with that. So we were trying to understand what the difference was there. And the thing that was interesting is that the product was amazing for the people who were, because it was based on, there was some history behind it, and it had a historical aspect behind that product. So it tied back to kind of the people that were reacting to it were true lovers of the brand, and they were true lovers of watches in particular at that point. So they were really, really into what this stood for, but they just were not, they loved the story behind it. So it really spoke to them. So in speaking with media and in speaking with, with consumers out there, they loved the watch. They would come in and they would look at it and they wanted to learn more about it. And they were like, liking all of the ads that we were doing about it, all of our social posts. They were enamored by this watch, but it wasn't translating with our retailers. And that's just based on the price point that it was at. And it wasn't something that people were able to purchase at that particular time. So it was, it was really interesting to understand what was creating that positive data, but the negative results from the sales department perspective, right? And I think that was so interesting to us.
I That's a great story. So unfortunately, we're kind of coming to the end of the podcast now, but I just wanted to ask you, you've got lots of experience, and it's so great to hear someone articulate the balance between the hard data and the soft stuff, because I've been reading so much about it recently. But I'm curious to know where, now that you know all of this stuff, now you've like cracked the code, what's the pain point? What is the thing that you're within data-driven marketing where you're like, oh, if only this problem would go away?
I think that often the pain point goes back to people accepting negative data. To me, that's a big pain point, because not just not just within my team, but when we're speaking to anyone at an executive level, when we're speaking to retailers, trying to express that, yes, we're not seeing that, but actually it's really positive because it helps us understand X, Y, Z. That doesn't always get translated across, and wanting to showcase where we can improve or things that we can do differently is a bit of a pain point for me.
All right, then. So let's do a 101 on that, right? So imagine you're speaking to your suppliers now, and you don't want them to bury the negative data. Like, what is the way to really make those negative outcomes work positively for you?
I mean, it's again back to psychology, but it's very simple. But instead of calling it negative results, here's areas of opportunity or things that we think that you could really improve on, or that would really improve your brand, or new approaches. Let's try this, and this, and therefore that's going to help you, because we're seeing in putting some further, what I like to do is put some further research behind it. So we're seeing that, I don't know, like this particular type of product doesn't perform well and it didn't get the right results. But what we're seeing is out in the market, your competitors are doing X and Y, and therefore you might want to do this, which would really help. So we want to try this now as our next step.
That is a lovely practical way to end the podcast. Zahra, thank you so much for your time. If someone wants to get in touch with you about any of the things we've discussed today, where's the best place to do that? But crucially, what needs to go into a message to get you to respond to them?
I will say I'm usually pretty good at responding to messages, but if they do add that they heard me on the podcast, that they heard the podcast and they had some questions from what I was speaking about, sending me a message on LinkedIn would definitely get my attention, and I'd be happy to answer that.
Brilliant. Zahra, thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, Tom.
Hi. Just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That'd just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.